Most people think the hardest mountains on Earth are the 8,000-meter giants, Everest, K2, and Annapurna. But some of the most difficult mountains in the world don't even come close to that height, and many elite climbers consider them far more dangerous. In this video, we're ranking the hardest mountains on Earth that are not 8,000 meters high. Every mountain on this list is here for a different reason. Some are brutally technical, with unstable rock and near-vertical ice. Others are defined by weather so violent that entire seasons pass without a single serious attempt. Number 6 is a wall where most expeditions leave without ever reaching the upper half. Number 7 is a ridge that obsessed climbers for nearly half a century, with a failure rate so infamous that surviving the attempt became the achievement. And the final mountain on this list is so hostile that decades pass between successful ascents, not because climbers stop trying, but because the mountain simply doesn't allow them to finish. We begin our journey with a mountain that doesn't rely on extreme altitude to make its point. Instead, it uses something far more subtle and arguably far more dangerous. Hidden deep within the coast mountains of British Columbia, Mount Waddington rises like a broken tooth of granite and ice above one of the wildest landscapes in North America. At just over 4,000 meters, it's far from the tallest peak on this list. But in terms of commitment, complexity, and isolation, it's a mountain many climbers underestimate. Waddington's difficulty begins long before touching ice or rock. There are no access trails, no nearby towns, and no easy approaches. Climbers reach the mountain by helicopter or bush plane, landing directly onto crevassed glaciers where even setting up a camp demands careful movement. The terrain itself requires confident, consistent mixed climbing, often on steep sections of unstable rock and shifting ice. Objective hazards dominate the environment. The glaciers here change shape constantly, with seracs that lean and buckle unpredictably. What is a navigable line one season can become completely impassable the next, and the brittle rock adds another layer of risk to every pitch. But the defining force on Mount Waddington is the weather. The coast mountains sit directly in the path of Pacific storm systems that arrive fast, heavy, and without warning. Clear skies vanish in minutes, winds rise suddenly. Fresh snowfall loads the slopes, while rapid warm-ups destabilize cornices and serac bands. The entire character of the mountain can change in a single afternoon. This volatility is reflected in its historical failure rate. Many teams retreat not because the climbing is too technical, but because the weather window collapses before they can move safely. Despite its relatively low elevation, Waddington carries a strong climbing reputation. It's seen as one of North America's purest tests of judgment, planning, and commitment. A place where experience matters more than altitude. This is the lowest mountain in our ranking, but it marks the true beginning of the journey. Waddington challenges climbers with shifting terrain and storms that erase entire routes overnight. But our next mountain takes that instability and pairs it with sharper ridgelines, colder winds, and exposure that demands absolute precision. Leaving the wild glaciers of British Columbia behind, we now cross the Pacific to a peak that stands as the centerpiece of New Zealand alpinism. Mount Cook, or Aoraki, rises sharply above the southern Alps, a jagged ridge of snow, ice, and fractured rock that looks deceptively approachable from a distance. But among climbers, this mountain is known for something far more intimidating than height: instability. The terrain demands confident alpine technique from the first step onto the route. Much of the climbing unfolds on mixed ground, pockets of hard ice followed by loose, crumbling rock, then steep snow ramps that shift from firm to hollow in the space of a few hours. Even the easiest routes require consistent movement, efficient transitions, and the ability to adapt instantly to changing surface conditions. Objective hazards are everywhere. The glaciers are thinning and breaking apart season by season, opening new crevasses and collapsing old lines, seracs fall. Without pattern, and rockfall funnels have become more active in recent years. On many ridges, retreat is almost as dangerous as continuing upward, leaving climbers committed to long exposed sections. And then there is the weather. Aoraki sits directly in the path of the Roaring Forties, powerful westerly winds that sweep across the Tasman Sea and smash into the mountain with almost uninterrupted force. Storms build quickly, light disappears without warning, and the snowpack can shift from stable to hazardous in a matter of hours. Even guided parties often sit in huts for days waiting for windows that never arrive. This volatility shows in the mountain's historical failure rate. Climbers don't turn back because the routes are too technical. They turn back because the conditions simply don't cooperate long enough to make progress safely. Yet, Aoraki carries a strong reputation. It's considered a proving ground for climbers who later attempt difficult Himalayan or Karakoram peaks. Precise movement, fast decision-making, and deep respect for the environment are essential, and the mountain punishes hesitation. It's the 13th hardest mountain on our list, but already the demands have increased sharply. Mount Cook challenges climbers with shifting snow, unstable rock, and storms that carve new routes overnight, but our next mountain adds a sharper edge. Alaskan exposure, colder temperatures, and steep faces where retreat becomes an art of its own. We now leave the violent storms of New Zealand and travel to a mountain that, at first glance, doesn't look dangerous at all. Alpamayo is often called the most beautiful mountain in the world, a perfect white pyramid rising above the turquoise lakes and black rock valleys of the Cordillera Blanca. But anyone who has climbed here knows that beauty and difficulty often share the same shape. The mountain's smooth, fluted face disguises a route that demands constant skill from the first step onto the glacier. Ice climbing is not just part of the experience on Alpamayo. It is the experience. The French direct and Ferrari routes require precise use of tools, secure placements, and efficient movement on 60 to 70 degree snow and ice. There are no easy pitches here. Every movement counts. Objective hazard is a constant companion. The snow flutes that make Alpamayo so striking also form delicate, unstable ribs that collapse after fresh snow or in midday heat. Small avalanches are common, and climbers often race the sun to reach safer terrain before the slopes weaken. Even a perfect weather window can turn dangerous with one poorly timed swing of temperature. Weather is less violent here than on coastal ranges, but it is still unpredictable. Clear mornings can shift to whiteout by afternoon, and storms roll over the crest of the Andes with surprising speed. Many teams retreat not because the climbing is beyond them, but because conditions refuse to stay stable long enough to allow safe progress. Historically, Alpamayo sees far fewer attempts than its reputation suggests, and the failure rate reflects that gap between appearance and reality. It is a mountain of precision, one that rewards climbers who move quickly, clearly, and without hesitation. Yet among serious alpinists, Alpamayo holds a strong place in the collective imagination. It's a test of pure ice technique wrapped in one of the most photogenic faces on Earth. Alpamayo offers beauty, challenge, and a pure introduction to high-level ice climbing. But our next mountain adds altitude, complexity, and exposure, and sits in the center of one of the most iconic climbing regions on Earth. From the sculpted ice and elegant symmetry of Alpamayo, we move to something sharper, darker, and far more compact, a peak that looks less like a mountain and more like a frozen blade driven into the Alaskan sky. Mount Huntington rises above the Ruth Gorge as a steep pyramid of granite and ice, a compact test piece that many climbers consider one of the finest and most intimidating peaks in North America. Huntington is technical from the very first pitch. The classic routes are a mix of sustained ice climbing, delicate mixed ground, and exposed ridgelines where every tool placement matters. There are few easy sections to regroup on. Climbers move through run-out sections of neve, thin ice smears, and steep rock steps that demand precision rather than brute force. Objective hazard is ever present. The faces are guarded by hanging seracs and flutings that shed snow and ice without warning. Avalanche paths cut across approach slopes and lower faces, forcing teams to time their movements carefully. On certain routes, a single mistake in route choice can place you directly beneath features that are slowly peeling away from the mountain. Then there is the Alaskan weather. The Alaska Range amplifies incoming storm systems, turning what might be a minor front elsewhere into days of high winds, blowing snow, and whiteout conditions. Clear spells are short and unreliable. Many Huntington attempts never leave base camp because the windows never really open or slam shut halfway up the route. The historical failure rate reflects that reality. Climbers often arrive with the skill to climb the mountain, but not the conditions. Retreat in bad weather is almost as serious as continuing upward, and many teams choose to bail early rather than risk being trapped high on the face. Within the climbing community, Huntington holds a strong, if slightly quieter, reputation. It's seen as a connoisseur's mountain, not famous to the general public, but deeply respected by those who know the Alaska Range. Huntington delivers dense, compact difficulty in cold, remote terrain, but our next mountain takes that technical mindset to higher altitude, sharper ridges, and one of the most iconic profiles in the entire Himalaya. After the compact brutality of Mount Huntington's mixed pitches and Alaskan storm cycles, we now shift to a mountain that replaces cold granite with sharp Himalayan exposure. Rising above the Sherpa villages of the Khumbu, Dablam towers like a frost-covered monument above the trail to Everest Base Camp. It is not the highest peak in Nepal, not even close, but among climbers, it carries a reputation far larger than its elevation suggests. Dablam is a technical mountain from the moment the ropes come out. The standard southwest ridge demands rock climbing skill on exposed granite, mixed transitions along snow-covered ledges, and delicate movement over ice-coated slabs. For many climbers, this is their first taste of true Himalayan technicality, where every handhold and foothold must be earned. Objective hazards are woven into the route. The Dablam, the hanging ice pillar that gives the mountain its name, has collapsed multiple times in recent decades, destroying the higher camps and forcing reroutes. Rockfall and icefall are persistent risks, amplified by the fact that most teams follow the same established line. Fixed ropes provide guidance, but they do not remove danger. Weather here is often favorable by Himalayan standards, but even mild winds at these altitudes can make movement precarious. Storm systems build quickly along the Everest Massif, and clear sky mornings do not guarantee safe conditions by nightfall. The best climbers read the mountain not by forecast, but by air temperature, snowfall patterns, and the sound of the ridgeline in the wind. Historically, Dablam has a moderate failure rate, not because climbers lack skill, but because conditions rarely align perfectly. Lines bottleneck, timing matters, and one bad decision in exposure can end a summit push with little warning. Despite its risks, Dablam's reputation is enormous. It is seen as a training ground for future Himalayan alpinists, a place where skill, balance, and judgment matter more than brute strength. Dablam delivers Himalayan exposure in its purest form. But our next mountain strips away the sense of assistance entirely, replacing fixed lines and crowds with a single dark face of stone and ice that has haunted climbers for generations. From the Himalayan ridgelines, we now travel to a mountain whose dark face has shaped the entire history of modern alpinism. The Eiger rises above the Swiss village of Grindelwald, a striking pyramid of limestone and ice that looks almost ordinary from the west. But its opposite side, the infamous North Face, or Mordwand, meaning murder wall, is one of the most feared pieces of terrain on Earth. The difficulty begins not with altitude, but with complexity. The Eiger demands a wide range of technical ability: steep rock sections with minimal protection, exposed traverses, mixed pitches that blend ice and fragile limestone, and snow slopes that change texture multiple times in a single climb. Movement must be efficient and exact. There are no simple sections on the wall. Objective hazards dominate this mountain. Rockfall is constant, amplified by daytime warming and the sound of meltwater splitting through the face. Seracs collapse overhead, and invisible sheets of ice form beneath thin snow. The North Face funnels weather and debris into narrow routes where escape is extremely difficult. Retreat is often more dangerous than ascent. Weather is infamous here. Storm systems sweep across the Alps with almost no warning, catching climbers halfway through technical sections where there's nowhere to shelter. Fog banks roll in and erase visibility. Fresh snow turns the wall into a trap of hidden ice layers and unstable ledges. The historical failure rate remains high, especially for climbers attempting new lines or solo ascents. Many of the tragedies on the Eiger have come not from lack of skill, but from sudden changes mid-route, circumstances that leave climbers exposed, exhausted, and unable to continue safely. Yet the Eiger's reputation is unmatched in Europe. It is not a highest peak achievement, it is a psychological and logistical test, a rite of passage in alpine climbing. The Eiger is where technical skill meets history. But our next mountain introduces something rare: remote cold, long routes, and the kind of exposure where storms can trap entire expeditions for days at a time. From the sharp, compact aggression of Huntington, we stay in Alaska, but now scale everything up: height, isolation, weather, and time commitment. Mount Foraker rises just southwest of Denali, a massive glacier-wrapped fortress that looks deceptively gentle from a distance. Up close, it is another story entirely. Foraker is a mountain of endurance, where skill is only one part of survival, and patience often matters more than strength. The climbing begins with long, sustained movement on mixed terrain. Routes such as the Sultana Ridge demand confidence in steep snow travel, precise crampon technique, and the ability to keep moving efficiently for many hours at a time. There are fewer short technical cruxes here than on Huntington, but far more cumulative exposure. Every small decision compounds over days, not hours. Objective hazards rise dramatically. The glaciers surrounding Foraker are vast and unstable, riddled with deep, hidden crevasses beneath wind-loaded snow bridges. Icefall zones shift every season. Even simple route finding becomes serious navigation. Teams must manage avalanche terrain on multiple aspects, often with no fixed lines and limited opportunity to retreat if conditions change. Weather, as always in the Alaska Range, is a dominant force. Systems stall here, blanketing the mountain in storms that can last a week or more. Winds accelerate through the Kahiltna Glacier corridor, and sudden temperature drops can transform climbable snow into bullet-hard ice overnight. Foraker may not have Denali's altitude, but it has Denali's weather, often concentrated and amplified. The historical failure rate is high. Success depends on patience, timing, and pure grit. Many expeditions sit and wait for windows that never come. Others go too early, get caught high in storms, and are forced into dangerous retreats over long, exposed terrain. Foraker's reputation is well earned. Among Alaskan climbers, it is considered a true test of judgment, a mountain where strategy matters as much as skill. Foraker stretches difficulty across space and time, but our next mountain concentrates that difficulty into pure precision, a granite spire in Patagonia where weather is faster, steeper, and famously relentless. We now leave the endless glaciers of Alaska for one of the most dramatic climbing arenas on Earth, Patagonia. Rising above the windy plains of southern Argentina, Mount Fitz Roy is a jagged skyline of granite spires wrapped in rime ice and storm cloud. It is not especially tall, but it has a reputation among alpinists that far outweighs its elevation. Here, weather and rock combine to create one of the most demanding climbing environments anywhere in the world. Fitz Roy's difficulty starts with the rock itself. The routes are long, complex, and consistently technical, sustained granite crack climbing at high altitude, mixed with snow and ice near the summit. Even the easiest normal route contains real rock pitches requiring solid movement, gear placement, and route finding under pressure. There are no straightforward lines to the top. Objective hazards present their own challenges. Ice smears cling to walls that trap falling debris from above, and rockfall funnels down. Gullies after storms or brief heat spikes. The terrain often forces teams to commit to long sections with few retreat options, and descent is rarely faster or safer than ascent. But what defines Fitz Roy more than anything is weather. Patagonia is notorious for violent winds, sudden whiteouts, and storms that form in minutes over the southern ice field. Climbers often describe waiting for a weather window as the hardest part of the expedition. Seasons sometimes pass with no safe summit opportunity at all. Many attempts turn into extended bivies on cold, exposed ledges, pinned down by storms that feel endless. Historically, the failure rate is significant, not because climbers lack technical skill, but because conditions simply refuse to cooperate. Planning matters, but luck matters just as much. Within the climbing community, Fitz Roy has an iconic reputation. It has been the proving ground for cutting-edge ascents, free climbs, and visionary lines that have changed high-standard alpine climbing forever. Fitz Roy introduces climbers to the true meaning of Patagonian commitment, but our next mountain strips away the alpine and keeps only the impossible, a pure wall of rime, wind, and ice that many still call the hardest summit in the Western Hemisphere. From the sweeping granite of Fitz Roy, we now move just a short distance across the southern Patagonian icefield to a spire that has inspired some of the most intense debates, controversies, and obsessions in climbing history. Cerro Torre rises like a needle of stone wrapped in frozen armor, a vertical storm sculpture that looks more impossible the closer you stand to it. To many elite alpinists, this is the single hardest summit in the Western Hemisphere. Cerro Torre is technical from the ground up. Even the most established routes require sustained mixed climbing with constant transitions between rime ice, rotten snow, and bare granite. The walls are overhung in places, and the famous iced mushroom near the summit has repelled teams for decades. Tool placement must be precise. Protection is often marginal. There are no casual pitches here. Objective hazard is equally unforgiving. Ice features change shape daily. Huge rime formations, sometimes dozens of meters tall, can detach without warning. Storms coat the rock in bizarre frozen textures that offer no grip and hide underlying weaknesses. Retreat, once committed, is extremely difficult, but it is the weather that defines Cerro Torre. Patagonia's infamous winds accelerate around the spire, creating a vortex of storms that strike with little pattern or predictability. Clear skies at base camp mean nothing. Climbers wait weeks for a window, sometimes for a window that never comes. Many expeditions end without anyone ever leaving the glacier. The historical failure rate is high, with countless attempts turned back within meters of success, forced down by ice conditions that become unclimbable mid-pitch. Numerous early summits remain controversial, and debates over bolts and ethics have shaped the mountain's legacy for decades. And yet, Cerro Torre's reputation is unmatched. This is a peak that sits at the intersection of ability, vision, and weather fortune, a place where elite climbers go not to tick a summit, but to test what is possible. Cerro Torre embodies the chaos of Patagonia, but our next mountain takes that intensity and places it in the heart of the Himalaya, a face so steep and shadowed that many climbers believe it is the single hardest wall in all of Asia. From the wind-scoured rime of Cerro Torre, we now move across the planet to a mountain that is less famous to the general public, but legendary among elite Himalayan climbers. Jannu, also known as Kumbhakarna, rises like a dark monolith above the Kanchenjunga region, a fortress of rock, ice, and vertical relief that has been feared for decades. If Cerro Torre looks impossible, Jannu feels impossible the moment you step onto its walls. The technical difficulty begins immediately. Jannu's north face is a 3,000-meter wall of overhanging granite sealed under layers of ice and unconsolidated snow. Movement here demands mastery of big wall alpine techniques, aid climbing, mixed pitches, and thin ice that barely holds the weight of a tool. Teams climb for hours without a single resting stance. Even experienced alpinists describe the face as a test of mental endurance more than physical strength. Objective hazards ramp up quickly. Seracs tilt overhead waiting for subtle. Temperature changes to release. Snow slabs fracture along hidden layers, and rockfall funnels run directly across the primary lines. The mountain is suspicious by nature. Features that feel solid in the morning can deteriorate by afternoon, as sun-exposed ice softens and refreezes into brittle plates. Weather remains a constant threat. Monsoon moisture hits this region directly, creating storms that gather speed across the Himalayan foothills before colliding with the high faces. Even during good windows, wind gusts can shut down progress and erase tracks on the route. Cold is not just uncomfortable, it dictates survival strategy. The historical failure rate is staggering. Many expeditions retreat without even reaching the halfway point. The successful ascents that do exist often involve groundbreaking style, new tactics, and teams willing to spend multiple seasons studying the mountain before a single attempt. Yet the climbing reputation of Jannu is immense, Among Himalayan alpinists, it is regarded as one of the purest expressions of big wall in the death zone, a mountain where skill matters more than oxygen and where even victory feels uncertain until the last rappel. Jannu is Himalayan precision at its most unforgiving, but our next mountain removes altitude from the equation and gives us something even more concentrated. A single granite tower in the Karakoram that many call the hardest rock climb on Earth. We now leave high Himalayan walls and cross into a region that is simply unique in world climbing, the Trango Group. Rising above the Baltoro Glacier, Trango Tower, also known as Nameless Tower, is the purest expression of vertical difficulty on the planet. Not a ridge, not a mixed face, not a snow dome. Just granite. Perfect, terrifying, infinite granite. From the first pitch, the technical demands are extreme. This is the realm of A3, A4 aid, sustained 5.11 to 5.13 free climbing, delicate crack systems, blank slab sections, and overhanging dihedrals that seem to go on forever. There is no easy terrain here. Teams haul portaledges, water, ropes, and hardware up hundreds of meters, repeating sequences until fingertips split and skin peels away. Every single meter requires skill, and more importantly, stamina. Objective hazards are surprisingly subtle, but when they hit hard. The Baltoro environment is dry, which reduces avalanches and serac falls, but afternoon rockfall funnels, sudden storm snow, and ice-choked cracks high on the wall can turn progress into survival. Retreat is complicated and slow. Rappels require precision and commitment under stress. Weather is unpredictable. Karakoram storms are infamous for their speed and violence, but the real killer on Trango is duration. One stalled system can pin a team to a portaledge for days, rationing water and food while winds threaten to tear the entire camp from the wall. Temperatures swing from blistering sun to freezing shade in minutes. The historical failure rate is high. Many expeditions arrive, establish a few pitches, and leave without reaching the upper headwall. Even successful climbs often require multiple attempts over multiple seasons. And the climbing reputation? Near perfect. Among elite rock climbers, Trango Tower is legendary, the hardest vertical objective in the high mountains. It is not alpinism plus rock. It is big wall mastery with altitude trying to kill you the entire way up. Trango Tower is pure technical suffering, but our next mountain adds altitude, objective hazard, and an infamous legacy of failure, making it one of the most feared peaks in the Karakoram. From the precision granite of Trango Tower, we now move to a mountain that has defined obsession in the Karakoram for nearly half a century. Ladakh 1, rising above the Choktoy Glacier, is a summit that has consumed lifetimes, defeated world-class teams, and produced one of the greatest unsolved problems in mountaineering, the North Ridge. The technical demands begin immediately. Ladakh isn't a single discipline, it's every discipline, back to back. Long alpine rock sections lead into unstable mixed terrain, then into sustained ice climbing where protection is scarce and movement is slow. Every pitch requires decision-making under uncertainty. The North Ridge alone contains thousands of meters of climbing across terrain that never truly relents. Objective hazards are constant. Avalanches sweep across fluted gullies, and icefall debris can sever fixed lines without warning. Storm cycles dump fresh snow on steep slabs, creating unsupported layers that collapse under a single, misplaced tool. Retreat is often more dangerous than ascent, requiring hundreds of meters of rappelling down terrain that offers no reliable anchors. Weather is brutally unstable. The Karakoram produces long, crushing storms that sit on a mountain like an anchor, forcing climbers into long periods of immobility. Temperature swings trigger rockfall and ice fracture. Even good windows are measured in hours, not days. The historical failure rate is infamous. For decades, some of the strongest climbers in the world attempted the North Ridge without success. Legendary expeditions turned back within sight of the summit. One of the greatest alpine achievements of the last 50 years was not climbing Ladakh 1, but surviving it. The climbing reputation is immense. Among elite alpinists, Ladakh 1 is a benchmark for mental toughness and perseverance. It demands patience, mastery, and humility. It's not enough to climb well. You must survive long enough to escape. Laytok 1 represents obsession carved into ice and stone, but our next mountain raises the bar in one decisive way. It doesn't just turn climbers back, it crushes them. From the long ridge battles of Laytok 1, we now move to a peak that is feared in mountaineering circles for a different reason entirely: cruelty. Brak, known simply as the Ogre, doesn't just shut climbers down on the way up, it tries to destroy them on the way back down. This mountain is not defined by difficulty alone, but by how mercilessly it punishes mistakes, delays, and even success. Technically, the Ogre is relentless. The standard lines combine steep rock, unstable mixed climbing, and near vertical ice and summit terrain that offers almost no safe resting positions. Nothing here feels secure. Not the holds, not the ice screws, not the anchors. Every meter is earned through slow, disciplined movement where exposure is constant. Objective hazards are severe. The mountain owes its reputation not to a single crux, but to hundreds of minor threats that accumulate over days. Collapsing cornices, unpredictable rockfall, serac bands that shift during the heat of the afternoon, and ice flutings that fracture under weight. The post-summit descent where Doug Scott famously broke both legs is now legendary and still serves as a warning. Surviving the Ogre is often harder than climbing it. The weather amplifies every risk. Karakoram storms bring sudden snowfall and whiteouts that erase route lines, force bivouacs on exposed ledges, and bury rappel anchors beneath unstable slabs. A good window here can last 12 hours. A bad one can last a week. The historical failure rate is frightening. Decades passed between the first ascent and the second. Elite expeditions arrived repeatedly, and repeatedly escaped lucky to be alive. The Ogre does not forgive hesitation or poor timing. The climbing reputation is near mythical. In elite circles, it's considered one of the most savage mountains ever attempted. Ask world-class alpinists which peak haunts them, and the answer comes fast: the Ogre. The Ogre is suffering distilled into granite and ice. But our final mountain is something altogether different, higher, sharper, and more unpredictable than anything before it. From the brutality of the Ogre, we now face a mountain that almost defies explanation. Masherbrum, often called K1, the first peak listed in the Karakoram, is a summit that intimidates even the most elite climbers. It is not the tallest peak in this region, but it might be the most unclimbable in a practical sense. Masherbrum is where ambition meets physics and where optimism is erased by reality. The technical difficulty is overwhelming. Masherbrum's fluted faces and broken ridgelines demand mixed climbing across terrain that never provides a rhythm. Rock pitches crumble under tool placement, ice runnels stretch into vertical walls with no safe stance. Progress is measured in meters, not pitches. Climbers often spend days trapped between sections, unable to advance and unable to retreat. Objective hazard is brutal. Serac bands overhang every major line. Avalanche paths cut directly through what would otherwise be the safest routes. Snowpack here behaves more like a living system than a material, expanding, collapsing, refreezing, and then fracturing again within a single weather cycle. Even in good conditions, instability is everywhere. Weather hits Masherbrum with surgical cruelty. Storms are sudden, violent, and long-lived. Wind amplifies exposure in the upper flutings to a level where movement becomes nearly impossible. Visibility collapses without warning, leaving teams stranded on terrain with no protected bivouacs. Temperature swings fracture ice overnight, turning yesterday's handholds into today's death traps. The historical failure rate is staggering. Successful ascents are so rare that they are studied line by the world's strongest alpinists. Decades pass with no recorded summits. The mountain doesn't just repel climbers, it erases attempts from memory, leaving little behind except cautionary stories. And in terms of reputation, Masherbrum may be the most respected unclimbed objective in the Karakoram among elite alpinists. It's described not as a goal, but as a career-long question. How do you climb something that doesn't let you climb it? Masherbrum is the final wall, towering above ambition, skill, and planning. These mountains prove that difficulty isn't about altitude, it's about weather, exposure, isolation, and decisions made under pressure. None of these peaks reach 8,000 meters, yet they continue to stop world-class climbers year after year. They demand skill, precision, and experience just to get close. Every summit on this list has a history of failure. Storms erase progress, ice collapses without warning, routes change every season. These are mountains that don't forgive hesitation or bad timing. They don't just challenge climbers, they reshape them. If you want more rankings like this, subscribe to the channel. I make deep dive videos on mountains, climbing history, risk, and expedition strategy. And I am trying to reach 1,000 subscribers. Comment below with the mountain that surprised you most, or suggest one you think should be included in the next video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.